So I'm going to do a shop tour.
Hi guys.
Pretty much to start the year off, and the reason I'm starting with a shop tour is I've been in here 7 years, 7.5 years, something like that. It occurred to me the other day that although I have done a shop tour in the past, I'm not sure if it's still on the channel, but there's been huge changes in here since the start, and so a lot of big changes just in the last 12 or 18 months or so, with swap rounds and all the rest of it. Now, this isn't the first workshop I've had at. If I just explain this place, effectively it is about 11 feet by 11 feet, although one side of it, which you'll see in a second, is actually kind of curved. It's sort of a D shape, a capital D. Me being at the bottom, you being at the top, and this is the straight side here, so it curves on that side. So because it curves, it's not quite 11 times 11 in sort of square footage. I reckon it's around about the 90, 95-ish square feet, something like that. So it's not massive, but I do manage to pull some fairly large projects in here, because just behind you is a set of double doors, so I can get stuff in and out, and then there's the main kind of access door here. Before I was in here, I actually effectively moved out of another workshop, which is about an hour's drive from here. I still have access to the place, but I don't use it as a workshop very often, and it's about the size of 2 double garages side by side. It's a little bit deeper than a garage, but if you take kind of 2 double garages, plonk them together, and then add a couple of foot on each side, that's about the size of it. That had everything I needed, apart from decent access. I used to do some really big projects in there. I actually made a bed, but because it only had a single door, a 2'6" door, it was very difficult to get things in and out, and I did actually end up doing it kind of on the hard stand in front of that workshop for the really big stuff, which obviously isn't very good in the winter. I came in here and it effectively was just a glass room, so with that come the inevitable problems of heat in the summer. It used to get up to at least 40 degrees in the summer at its very highest, and then obviously down to really, really cold in the winter. And then you get condensation, and that transition, it just was a nightmare with trying to keep timber straight and true and all the rest of it. So as the years went on and leftovers came through from jobs and projects, I started to put polystyrene in the roof. And then this, if you can see it, silver polystyrene pop bubble wrap type stuff over the top of that, which kept leaks out. It helped with condensation. As you come in the morning and there'd be condensation on the glass, and it would drip on various things, including the worktops and tools, and it's far from ideal. And I don't say this to create some kind of sob story, maybe just to kind of reassure people that are just starting out in their workshops and they think they haven't got the best space, and they think that everyone else's space is better and bigger and all the rest of it. This place has evolved over quite a long time, and your workshops will evolve over a period of time as well. So we always want bigger, we always want better, and we kind of grow ourselves with what we do and the spaces that we have. Long term, we still plan to build the Fizz factory. That's just over that way for some. It'll be built from scratch, effectively purpose built, posh shed really. And that's when time and money allow, because 2 sheds need to come down, ground needs repaired, electric needs to be run before we can even kind of put a spade in the ground. Roof leaks, there's problem condensation, there are plants growing in various corners. Because of the way that this building was put up by the previous people, nothing to do with me or anyone else, it's basically sitting on a concrete pad, and then it's just been erected on top of that, and then the floor's been put in the middle like a pond basically, but not a hole, it's just a concrete pad. And what's happened over years is the moisture this time of year when it's wet, there's no guttering or anything, so the rain comes off and it basically sits in a little puddle, and the water gets underneath the concrete floor that's in here. Cracks have started appearing where the moisture's got in, it's frozen in the winter, it's caused cracks. and in places you can see where the concrete is actually wet and damp, so it's far from ideal. But on the whole, it's dry, and on the whole, with a jumper on, it's warm. You see me in here in a t-shirt in the summer. And let me show you around, and I'll show you what I've built, what I've done, what I've changed, and all the rest of it. So just in picture up here, I've got an air scrubber, air filter. It's a box with a filter and a fan that sucks air through, hopefully pushes clean air out. That's a relatively new addition. I think this is about 2 years old. There is a video of me hanging that and a bit of a review on it as well. I did have some issues, but they seem to have been kind of resolved themselves. I've also, I don't know if you can see it in the picture here, I've got some clamps, which just these little ones actually stick to the ceiling. Just keeps them out of the way, because it is relatively high. What I've gained in kind of storage space, obviously I lose in kind of wielding space. If I've got something long, I tend to hit this and knock it, and it always scares me, or knock things down. So it's, you know, it's livable. Up here I've got one of my kind of 2 or 3 sticker boards, onto which I just knocked up a plywood band with some holes in, which keeps all my kind of Morse taper ended things for the lathe, drive centers, live centers, chucks and stuff like that. Recently above there I've put hopefully you can see that, I've put a clamp which has a mount for my camera, so I can do kind of an overhead mount for my mobile phone and camera. Main workbench is on this wall. It'd be nice to be able to get all the way around it, and I actually built it with that in mind. Starting from the entrance side, main sliding doors where I come in, I've got a pillar drill which is bolted down onto basically a square stand. It's built to the same height as the workbench, but there's actually a divide just here at this point. So they're 2 separate. I actually built the 2 of them with a view to being able to get them into another space and not need them up against the wall, so they can go all the way around. So the sides are actually strong enough to hang things on and things like that, and they're not on wheels, they're purely plonked in this space. There are videos on the workbench build and also the pillar drill stand. It's a Ryobi pillar drill. I think I paid about 50 quid for it. It came from a supplier. It was their last one. They weren't going to be stocking it again. And I pretty much, as I understand it, got it at near enough cost. Behind that, I put in this year, I think it was, from some scrap oak-faced MDF, just some little shelves to keep small sundries on, stains, oils, finishes, mostly kind of lathe-related stuff, but it's sort of evolved into lubricants and machine care stuff as well. So I've got oils and Loctite and WD-40 and stuff like that, as well as sanding sealers and Danish oil and melamine finish for turning. On the back of that is kind of a tool wall. It was built in a hurry and it's sort of evolved over time, and it's something that I'd like to condense, but also rearrange, save a bit of space, and remove kind of duplicate things of. But pretty much everything in there gets used fairly frequently, which is why it's still on there. Above it, this was just a piece of basically scrap MDF that was kicking around. I had no use for it, so I painted it with some kind of black blackboard paint, and screwed it on there into the wall studs, and it's sort of become a bit of a note-taking place for when an idea comes or a job that I need to do. It tends to get scribbled up there. There's no kind of workshop lighting. I know people are massive into 150 bazillion lumen lights. I've got 2 desk lamps which I can move around. This one swivels to use with a pillar drill, or if I'm working on here. And then I've got on the other side here, which was just a cheap B&Q, like 6 or 7 quid student desk lamp. But they've both got energy-saving LED light bulbs in them. And I went for the quite cold light, so it's not too orange in here. My lathe is not bolted down anymore. It used to be bolted down where it used to live. It is underneath this a Record Power DML 305, which I've had now for probably getting on for 10 years. I bought it because I wanted to carry on turning. I didn't have a lathe, so I bought it. and it's done. Touch wood, it's done all right. No dramas there. I don't regret buying it. I get to play on it, and I kind of use it as my toy. Move this tripod out of the way. Underneath the workbench, again starting with the pillar drill stand, I added this drawer. It's all made out of scraps, cobbled together with what I had. I keep all my drill bits that I keep with the pillar drill. So these are sort of duplicates, spares from toolboxes that I carry around, and the larger stuff, which is more pillar drill suitable. So there's things like 35mm Euro hinge drill bits, which are better suited to pillar drills, and then there's spare driver bits I keep in here, small kind of engineering type drill bits, metric and imperial bits in there. A few toolboxes that I can pull out and either use here, or if I'm on the road, take them out to a job site. Underneath is this birch ply stained, it's actually birch plywood box, and it's on rollerblade wheels. I got the idea, I basically copied Matthias a few years ago now, maybe 6 years ago. I built this. It's dovetailed in the corners. There is a video on it. I dovetailed it because I could. I wanted to see how good it would be with plywood, and it wasn't too bad. But the main purpose of this was to see if I could stain plywood, and it turned out okay. And it ended up coming under here, and it's basically a scrap bin for mostly turning blanks and laminations and offcuts of all hardwoods. There's no softwood in there at all. It's all like my half decent kind of too good to throw away. It might be a pen sized bit of scrap wood. Some metal stuff down here, brass, stainless steel, a bit of acrylic, some melamine, flat stuff that's too good to throw out, too small to be used for much, but obviously too big to go in the bin. So that's for that. Underneath the main workbench, when I built with the Vise, I didn't want to just lose this space under here, so I've actually got a tiny wee drawer, which is no bigger or useful than the drill bit drawer, but it does keep a few things in there. And then toolboxes that I have bits in, just a few. When I built this bench, it basically all evolved, or revolved, should I say, around having a big drawer. I wanted a massive drawer I could just drop stuff in, keep stuff tidy, just kind of basically open it, sweep all the stuff in, and it would clear the workbench fairly quick. That turned out not to be such a good idea because it's quite deep, it is really heavy with all the stuff dropped in it. But there's various things in here, as well as these kind of pull-out slidey trays, which actually were a really good idea. They're only about 2 inches deep, and they're great for little things like scalpel blades, pencils. I think there's some punches, some nail sets, glass cutter, pens and pencils mostly, kept in there. And then at the back there's another one, which I think has got some spoke shaves, shoulder plane, some ore stones, scrapers, just little things that you can go out fairly easily without too much trouble, and you can just chuck it in there and basically empty the surface off fairly quickly. There we go. So if I'm on, I'll be basically on this side. So moving around from the workbench off the end, this is the end of the workbench, and like I said, I built it so that it could be moved somewhere else. So I actually put another vise on the end here, which at the moment is redundant, but it'll just save me a job later on if it moves. And it actually doesn't actually take up any extra space, really. From here round is just a piece of, again, off-cut plywood. I don't know where it came from, it just was there. And that was cut to fit this kind of weird space, because from this point here, further round until you get opposite. This is where it starts to curve. So behind all this stuff is like little triangles of space that I can't put anything in without sort of having some weird U-shaped bench top, which wasn't worth the hassle. So this is just a piece of 12mm ply, and now it's sagging, and I don't really care because it does its job. Just an extra bit of horizontal dumping ground, basically. Again, cobbled together. I've got my turning tools in a scrap wood, plywood, cut and nailed together, offcuts, just some holes for all my turning tools. I don't have many turning tools. I don't do loads of turning, don't do anything flush. So I've basically got the basic set of 6 with about another 6 or so that I picked up over time, second hand. Above that, I've got my hearing protection. These are radio ones and basic ones for when I've got things like the router table going or the table saw for any period of time. I've got a 18-volt drill driver charger. That's the Hikoki one, because all my cordless tools now are Hikoki, which used to be Hitachi and is Metabo HPT in North America. So if you're watching from other parts of the world, but Hitachi, Hikoki, Metabo HPT is all basically the same battery, compatible with tools. So charger on there. I don't use it very often. I don't even plug it in because the light flashes and it's just using electricity that's not using, basically. So I unplug it unless I actually need to use it. And above up here, I've got these. These are actually Ikea storage bins. They're birch ply 6mm, something like that. They came from FreeCycle, I think. I was given them by another member of the family. Got some stuff off FreeCycle. They were there, picked them up, brought them over. So I didn't paint them. They're just, but they're handy to put little things in. They've been in here since the start of the workshop. If you look on my really early videos, I used to live kind of down here somewhere by the table saw when it was where I'm currently standing. But they've sort of moved around in here because they're really handy and I've kept them, and they'll move out when we move out as well. Underneath, which you can't see, so I'll move that camera down. They're just little things that sort of need a space. The one thing I've found to keep this place tidy is everything needs a home. It needs somewhere to put it, and if it doesn't have its place, it just gets dumped until it has a place to get found, if that makes sense. So even in a small space, and I hate to use the woodworker cliche of I think I've made best use of space, because I probably haven't, because otherwise it wouldn't have evolved so well. It just needs a little hole to put it in to be grabbed when needed. So that's sort of basically a little dumping ground to just keep things out off the main worktop. Underneath is my compressor. It's a Bosch Stitch compressor which I bought with a 18 gauge nailer and hose in a set. I think it was like 120 quid or something from Screwfix at the time. I very rarely use it now because I've got the Hikoki cordless. And when they finally bring out a 23 gauge, that will go and create more space. So because I don't dislike air, I don't really have a need for it now. It's just in here, basically taking up space. This is something that doesn't have a home, so it just gets lent up in here. It's the floor and obviously pole thing for my effectively main dust extractor. This is the fine 35 litre M-class extractor. Really good extractor, really expensive. Fine very kindly sent this to me. I don't know why. To do the way they picked me of all the people they could have picked. But they asked me if I would like to have a look at it, kind of do a review on it, and they came over and did a little video. It is really good. It is really expensive. If you're a hobby woodworker, it's probably not something you want, but if you are a tradesman, really, really good. And then above that, I've got my 2 main sanders and a box of abrasives that I use here and also take out with me on jobs. A couple of bits of scrap. This is a fairly recent addition, although it's not new to me. I actually found this dustbin, trash can, whatever you want to call it, at the side of Country Road out in Fens. One evening in summer a few years ago, I used to keep it for firewood in one of the sheds. so we gave like a good dry bit before I built the wood store. This previously was like one of those little tiny waste bins that you get in a bathroom or toilet, and I found it. I fill it up and then not empty it. So I got this massive, pulled this out of the shed, and just having although it takes up 4 times the space, having a big trash can, really, really good. And I'm loving having that in here. So I'll move that out of the way for now. This is a kitchen cupboard. I've taken the doors off. It actually came out of my parents' kitchen before they changed their kitchen, and I managed to salvage it before the guys chucked it in the skip. And I refixed some of the shelves so that I could fit a Sustainer 4 height and a Sustainer 3 height with a little shelf on the top. So I've got a lot of wood screws and fixings basically in here, plugs and screws, and I can just pull the whole box out and take it to a job with me. And then this is the older style with some Dutchman pre-cut for repairing doors, door linings and things like that. Brackets for kitchens, magnets, door related stuff, and the kind of the spare fancy screws you get with decent hinges, and lock spindles and things like that for doing remedial repairs in there. And then I've got a biscuit jointer, which I know some people is a bone of contention. I quite like the biscuit jointer. It's definitely got its place. Doesn't come out very often, but it's still here. So that means if it's still in here, I use it enough to warrant it. One of these Ikea sustainers, this one with van, it's basically got kind of an hodgepodge mixture of tools in it. So screwdrivers I don't use very often, and grips and hacksaw blades and things to kind of get me out of a fix, but not stuff I want to leave in the van because I like to leave my van empty. So there's that, and then my cordless SDS drill in here. So they're nice and useful, nice and easy to grab. The Ikea cordless that L+ one. This is slowly becoming my kind of go-to Hoover. It's not the most powerful because obviously it's cordless, although it is a 36 volt. But it's bagless, so it means I can do a quick sweep up and I can just hoover all the stuff up if I've been turning particularly, and then I just empty it into the trash. I don't have to worry about basically wasting money on hoover bags and stuff like that. Although the M Class can be bagless in terms of it's a sack, those bags are quite expensive. Whereas this isn't, and obviously being cordless, I can just pull it around wherever it needs to be. I've got a 12 volt charger for my Ikea 12 volt tools, which live on the workbench. They're kind of my workshop tools. And I put it here because under here I've got an extension lead. So it's much easier to plug in. If I leave it plugged in, I don't know if you can see that, the light works on there. On top of this covered cabinet base unit, I'll put some battens and then another board just to raise it up a little wee bit. And then on top I've got this timber unit, which actually it came from an auction. That's right, yes, it actually came in the trolley, which you'll see in a bit. And it lived inside that, and I pulled it out. I don't know where it came from before that. It was some engineer's kind of estate auction. And it's really handy because obviously it doesn't impede space because there's effectively no door because of the timbre. So in here I keep most of my abrasives in boxes. These pink boxes are just scrap wood, bits of MDF and plywood with dividers, and dividers do actually come out, most of them. It's mostly abrasives, tack cloths, bench cookies, and sanding pads for oscillating tools, multi-pads, multi-master, fine multi-master, oscillating tool. Some bowl sanders that I made. It's basically just kind of sanding in here. I made some bowl sanders for turning. I think there's a video on that. I did these live, I think, in one of my live streams, so they might not be on my channel anymore, but really easy to make anyway. More sanding pads, more sanding stuff, a kind of a sucky pad for carrying glass and granite tops and things like that. That's quite handy. It fits onto the track saw track. More sanding pads, and also behind here I've got a box of guide bushes and router cutters and ancillaries for router jigs, which are on the top here. This is going to change. This is one of the plans for, if you can still see that, let me just move that up a bit. Here I've got my Dovetail Jig, or one of my Dovetail Jigs actually. This is the one that's current. I've also got an older one which I bought years and years ago. But this is going to change. If you remember the Ikea plywood boxes I've got from when I was a student, is one that's only one high, but it's not quite as wide as that, which I'm going to bring over, which is great for keeping pens and pocket knives and things like that, marking tools. Yeah, so that's going to come over and sit on top of that, and then jigs will be on that. So that'll free up a lot of space for marking tools and pencils and tape measures kicking around. So that's one of the jobs for early this year. Old bed sheets. If I have an old cotton bed sheet that sort of had its day, wash it, and I cut it up into long strips and then roll up those long strips, so I can basically tear off chunks that I need and use them for staining, finishing, anything like that. It's good. I don't know why it's been left out. I'm not going to put it away. Another thing I've got on here is a bit of 3x2 CLS from a stud, and I've wrapped it in a piece of cardboard. No, I haven't. I've wrapped it in a piece of carpet. So if I'm working on some old bit of furniture to do some restoration work, or something that's I don't battered around and scuffed and scratched, put it on this carpet and I can slide it around and it doesn't harm it. So it's a good bit there, and then some spare bits of carpet. If I'm working in someone's house and I take all my toolboxes, because they're fairly heavy and they've got little feet on them, I don't like putting them down on somebody's carpet and leaving the kind of furniture. You know, when you move a chair or a settee, you get those little marks on the floor. So I like to take old bits of carpet and carpet underlay with me. The other reason I love this little vac as well, it doubles as a handy little stool. Let's move that bit of plywood out of the way. So back here to the side of my kind of cupboardy timber bit, I've got some plastic boxes that's got stains and finishes in it. Stuff that really isn't that badly affected by the cold, because obviously it's January, December time. So that stays in there. Just stuff I don't use very often and I'm not very precious over. So just to raise this is sort of the main tool extractor. I did say that my main extractor was the fine shop vac, and that's basically what it is, shop vac. So that's small tools, sanders, saw, track saw type stuff for the fine extractor. This one goes on to machines, so table saw, ROUTERTABLE, band saw, which you'll see in a second. And I put these down here just to raise it up, because they're not used very often and this doesn't come out very often. You can see it's not even attached at the minute. So, although it is permanently plugged in. Dustpan and brush, massive dustpan, decent brush, absolute godsend. Because it's quite small, it's fairly quick to tidy up in here, but I do like to keep it on top of it, purely because I don't like working in a messy environment, and if it gets too messy and too dusty, then you end up kind of dragging that through into the house, and then that creates all manner of trouble. Cold teas, uncooked food, all kind of, I'm kidding. Anyway, the table saw at the moment, see, I'm in a bit of a, I'm betwixt emotions with the table saw. I'm very tempted to basically lose the table saw in favour of the track saw and the band saw as a combo. I don't use the table saw for large sheet stuff, because I either get the track saw out, do it outside, or I get my supplier to do it for me. So I never cut big full sheets, and there isn't actually room in here to feed a full sheet in. So it mainly comes down to ripping thin rips with the table saw, which doesn't need such a large footprint. Now, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you'll probably remember that the table saw on its bench was basically here where my feet are, and I used it pretty much as the sort of main video demonstration-y sort of workbench, because it was quite large. I got this table saw. This is the Makita MLT 100. It's not a bad table saw. It's not the best, but at the time I think I paid about 350, 400 quid for it, and I got this because it was the largest top, because that's what I thought I wanted, and it served me really well, to be fair. I've upgraded various bits. This broke, and I returned a new handle for it, fixed the fence, and put a bigger fence on it, which is much better than the original. Made a crosscut set, all the usual sort of stuff that people do to table saws, including the knee kick switch. But it slowly went and got used less and less. So it's currently gone from being right in the middle of the floor to on a smaller. I've actually reduced the size of this bench that it came on. I've put it on wheels and moved it to the side. So it currently is basically a not used workbench. As you can see, it's got a chop saw sat on it, which isn't set up. And it's also got the hose for the little cordless vac sitting on it. Underneath here, I've got another Dovetail Jig, which, as you can see, doesn't come out very often, but it's good for through dovetails and odd sized and different sized dovetails. So rather than having the uniform, like only half-inch pins and tails, you can have them in 1/8 of an inch increments. So you can have 1/8 of an inch, and the next one 1/2 inch, and the next one 3/8, and then the next one 1/4 inch, and change up the sizes. So it looks a little bit more handmade with that one. And then Untitled Jig, which comes out every now and again. It hasn't been used for a little while, as you can see, but great for mortise tenons with the router. Absolutely brilliant. There's a couple of videos of me using this, and I really do like it. Underneath, I've got a cordless circular saw and my 16 gauge nailer. And then underneath that is a box. Pull it out. What's in here? This is all nuts and bolts and screws, fixings and hardware type stuff, in little pull out trays of various sizes. Yeah, nuts and bolts and all sorts of weird things like that. I don't keep loads of stock of hardware because I don't need to. It's just money tied up in stuff that I very rarely use. Basically, that's if I need bolts, I'll buy a pack of bolts. Anything left over goes in here, and that becomes kind of stock. So that's that. Up until this point, this cupboard, everything apart from the shop vac is fixed. Once we get around this side, what I've done is I've put everything on wheels. So I recently upgraded the kind of table saw trolley stand, whatever you want to call it, onto 4-inch casters for the weight, because there's a lot of weight on here. I've got clamps on this side of it, and I've also got clamps on the other side of it as well. So woodworking clamps on hanging off the side of that trolley. So there's a lot of weight on there, on those wheels. And what I found with the previous wheels, they were only 2-inch wheels. They just basically went flat because it never moved either. This gets moved around a bit more to free up space. So last year I basically worked out anything that can go on wheels, put it on wheels, and get the best quality, heaviest rated wheels that you can afford. I think these are 100 kilo wheels, and then I've got some others which are 75, so more than adequate for the weight loading. I mean, 400 kilos, that's a lot of weight on here, although to be fair, it's probably approaching that. but the wheels are holding up well. 2 lock-in, 2 non-lock-in, basically as standard on those. So it goes around there. Behind here I've got a load of bar, rail clamps for, the sort for running a circular saw along the side of, or running a router along the side of, just as a rail. And then there's a T-square one as well, protractor version. So what have we got in there? You can just about see it. So just over to the side of the table saw, where the table saw kind of lives in the corner there. I've got a large plastic drum. It's a barrel actually, and it came from when I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry. This is what a lot of pharmaceutical product and excipients come in. I don't know what it was in there, but they used to get that steam cleaned out by whoever, and then occasionally, because we had an abundance of them and they can be used again, they'd let a few of us occasionally take 1 or 2 home. So they're really good for keeping bags of plaster, open bags of plaster, and in this case scrap wood in. So I've got a scrap wood bin, bigger the better, and it just gets kind of emptied out into the wood store or goes straight into the burner, whatever needs to happen. There's a few scraps of wood behind it, and then I think you can see just about, and if you can't, there's a sticker wall behind that on the wall with some more of the long clamps on there. I tend not to put anything right up against the edge there, because the doors, there's set double doors there that open, and in the summer when it is really hot, I tend to have one of the doors open as far as I possibly can, and then I've got some old kind of cast iron, I think they are, weights, scales, the old sort, just to prop it open, so it doesn't bang around in the breeze, but it lets a lot of the hot air that accumulates in here out. And then if I open a window as well, you get a bit of a breeze through as best as I can. So now everything's on casters. This is a little trolley I made, old plywood, and it just keeps these empty totes on, and these are all just full of basically scrap wood and things that are currently in transit. So there are no tools live in these specifically, but if I go to a job and when I'm clearing up, if I've already packed a toolbox away, then the tools go in one of these, and then when I get back and everything gets unloaded and stored, then anything that's in these gets put into the associated toolbox as I'm packing away. It just makes more sense than just having to unload another toolbox or put one thing in a thing. So the reason I don't lose things basically, and they're all on wheels and a little caster thing, so I can zuzz it out of the way as I need to. Right over in the corner you can see there's the black box. This is again on a trolley. This weighs an absolute ton, this box, and inside it is just stuff basically. Bowl blanks, there's in there mid project stuff and little things for projects. So there's kind of some bits of leather and leather working tools in there, and odds and ends, some old plane irons, old chisels, things that need restoring, things that need sharpening, things that can be repurposed for something else, all manner of things. And it's kind of my things that I want to make and make a video of, kind of project wise, are in here. So hopefully throughout 2020 this box will get gradually emptier and emptier and lighter, and that will create even more space in here. So over in this corner, this is a recent upgrade actually. Previously I had the Trend CRT 3 route table with my T11 router installed in that, and actually you can see that on the top here. This has now been upgraded to the WRT, which is the workshop route table. It's got a larger footprint, slightly better base. It's on casters as well. It takes the same router, and all the kind of ancillary items, feather boards and miter gauges and stuff like that, all fit both. So I've basically now doubled up on all my feather boards. So I've got 2 top and 2 side feather boards and all the rest of it, which is quite handy. It works really well. I've also now got a spare volt release switch as well, which is quite handy for other things and other plans I've got. Downside is it's got a slightly larger footprint, but because it's on casters, it really doesn't make any difference in here. I can just wheel it out, put it in the middle of the workshop, use it, and then wheel it back again. And the fact that it is on casters and with an open, you can see it's got an open frame to it, means I can store things underneath it as well. Now I did actually have to modify it slightly. If you can see the back three, or the two sides and the back, what do you call stretchers and supports for the legs, they were all at this lower level, and I re-drilled the two front legs so I could raise this up, and that was done so that I could fit stuff underneath it. Because you know, there's basically a wasted load of space under there. The other option was to put a shelf on the floor and have it very similar to how the other things are, but I thought there's no point. I've got stuff on casters. I slide it underneath, wheel it underneath. It's even handier. And potentially, if I bring over, once that box is empty, I could potentially bring over my thickness planer or possibly my bench jointer, and that could live under there as well. So there's an option for that. It gives me flexibility, and that's part of the way of organising this space, is keeping everything flexible and basically stuffing things in every nook and cranny and keeping it tidy. I think they're probably the 3 tips for a tidy, organised workspace. So the router table, I couldn't be without a router table. Not only is it a good working surface, obviously I can do so much with a router table for making my mouldings and all the rest of it. So that brings us round to this side, to this trolley, and this in its own right has been basically an evolution as well. So it used to be a green trolley. In fact, previously it was used as a downdraft table, as a slash outfeed table for the table saw, when the table saw was big in the middle there. I made a video of building the downdraft table, and whilst it worked fantastically and there was absolutely nothing wrong with it, the workshop wasn't really big enough to warrant that kind of size of tool. So what I did was I basically repurposed the materials, took the small box out of the bottom and used the top, which was a good plywood top, as the new top for the table saw bench, and then sanded off the trolley, resprayed it, kind of did it up a little bit, and put a new birch ply top on it with this flip down section, which I will eventually build some like little kind of wings on there, and then I routed with the Trend MFT router jig, an MFT style dog top, and it's really good actually. It's not a good solid workbench, but it is great for clamping things down to sand on, and obviously the extra flip up gives me a little bit more horizontal storage space, which I can then just drop down without needing to take up more floor space. That's the idea of it. Obviously I haven't really used it as a full-on top at the moment because basically it's not finished, but eventually that'll get finished. The downside of having the holes in is obviously any waste on here drops down onto what's below. I've got my bandsaw on here. This is a 10-inch benchtop bandsaw, and whilst it's not the greatest, it is, to be fair, it's not bad. If you've got a cheap, inaccurate bandsaw that you don't like and you want to upgrade, go buy yourself a new blade. Makes a world of difference, trust me. I keep my saw blades folded and up the top here, on the back of the air scrubber that I showed you right at the start. This is really the only bit of wall space in here, and I dedicated that to the clamp racks. Originally there was a kind of a little cubby hole thing on here, where I used to keep some clamps and a few bits and pieces. Whilst that was fine, it was actually repurposed. That's now in Kat's, my other half's craft room. She uses that, and I just made another clamp rack and screwed onto the wall. They're all, pretty much all, they're mostly Ikea clamps. Ikea are a Spanish company. They are very similar to Bessie clamps. However, I genuinely wholeheartedly believe the pier clamps are better than the Bessie clamps. Everyone knows Bessie because basically they're everywhere. If you're in the States, you can get the pier clamps through Rockler. In the UK, you can get them through Pier UK, and I think now through Tibby Singh. Brilliant clamps. If you can warrant the expenditure, you honestly won't be disappointed. They're fantastic. Really good clamps. So 10-inch bandsaw, which is bolted to this. My biggest bugbear with this is the dust extraction is inadequate, I'll say. I've got a few ideas of improving it, and that's another job for this year. So that will go on the chalkboard. Basically, you've got this hose at the bottom here, which gets a lot of sawdust, but it really needs something up here. So I'm working on 3D printing designs and repurposing existing components to improve that. That'll definitely be a video because I think a lot of people will benefit from that. I've got some jigs on here. I've got a crosscut sled for bandsaw, which I made mostly for cutting pen blanks, I'll be honest. So that lives next to there. And then I've got my circle cutting jig, which lives up in the rafters, which is did a video on that. 5 minutes with your bandsaw, make yourself a circle cutting jig. Works great. Underneath the trolley, I've got kind of a hodgepodge of things at the moment. We've got a drawer and some saw blades, which, let me move these out of the way. This drawer came out of the original stand for my old ROUTERTABLE, the old CRT, before I swapped to the larger one. And it's got basically pencils and marking tools. They're going to go in the Ikea long one that I was telling you about. So that'll free that drawer up when that gets swapped over. Then I have these new toolboxes, which are made by Trend. So far they're working out really well. I've had these in the workshop a few weeks now, and they're actually really good. They're not what I was expecting, if I'm honest. I was pleasantly surprised. There's a combo of 4 with a wheelie trolley, which I'm sort of jiggling things around. Really quite good. They're going to be good in the workshop, I think, and also storing things in the van. So you will be seeing more of those. They might go on a kind of a dolly caddy to live under the router table, because this one currently has got router table bits in it, so it makes sense to keep the two together. But at the moment, while that black heavy box is so heavy, I don't want it on this shelf. So currently I've got these toolboxes on here, route jig, a shooting board. So many people forget about the old simple tools. Really good. I can't recommend one of those highly enough. In fact, interestingly enough, that will form quite an early video in a new series for starting from nothing, from basically no workshop space series if you're starting out in woodworking. So keep an eye out for that one. I've got some mini sustainers under here, which have some plastic shims and some brackets and fixings for the router jigs that I was showing you earlier, the guide rails. And then, what's in that? I don't know what's in the bottom one. Could be anything. Filters, mask filters in that one. And then scroll saw. So I'm not a big scroll saw fan. Kat uses this the most, if I'm honest, but it is handy. Again, it's a record power one. It's one that was given to me by Jamie Page over at JP Woodworks. He loves his scroll sawing. And to be fair, it's not a bad little scroll saw. Behind that, I've got my pocket hole jig in its case. Keep it in the case so I can just pick it up and take it off to a job. And I've got a laser level in there as well, which I sometimes carry on jobs. As you can see, this isn't currently the best use of this space. My plan is to put a slim drawer in there on some decent drawer runners and have small marking tools. So a few carving chisels, a few bench chisels, squares, and calculator and little bits like that, and they'll be stored in some shadow foam, which is over by the door. I don't think I mentioned it before, but with the strips of scrap wood by the sticker board there, I've kept that because it's exactly the right size to go in a nice slim drawer. Kind of an upgrade from that big heavy drawer. The idea was brilliant, but I don't think the execution was quite on point for that drawer, so that's kind of an evolution for this. That's going to happen this year as well. Underneath the trolley, I'd quite like to have a drawer like the red birchwood drawer to fit underneath here. I do have some birch ply, and I've also still got some roller blade wheel, the other 4 roller blade wheels from the same pair for that one. So I might put a drawer under there that I can basically scoot backwards and forwards. Currently there is a long reach clamp which sort of doesn't have a home, which is why it's there. Another toolbox where I keep mostly kind of door related paraphernalia. So if I'm fitting doors and locks, my various lock jigs, various airbags for lifting doors, door lifters, those kind of things for when I'm fitting doors and stuff. And then obviously glue gun, heat gun that you can see there. Bench grinder for sharpening my turning tools and grinding other little bits and pieces. Another bench vise. I thought about putting a bench vise on the trolley. I don't know whether I will or not, but I've got an old bench vise there which I found at a car boot sale. It's too good to pass up at the time, and I might find a use for it either in this workshop or the next workshop. If I could give somebody any piece of advice when you're watching a shop tour, by all means pick up the ideas, but don't take away from this. You know, loads of cool stuff, or I haven't got anything like that, and I should have all of that. Grow into your workshop. Don't try and rush it. This is, like I said, 7-8 years of evolution in here, and as hopefully you've seen, it's changed a lot in that time, but it's changed steadily and it's changed as required. So don't try and rush into it. But the biggest mistake I made, I think, looking back on that time, is building a hoofing great big bench in the middle with the biggest table so I could fit on it. And now I'm torn to take it out and replace it with the MFT. If I replace it with the MFT, I've got loads of storage space underneath, much better storage space than I currently have. And I can get other tools in here as well. So your most valuable thing in any workshop, I believe, is floor space. If you can keep as much floor space free, you're onto a winner. Putting things on casters, I listen to people saying put it on casters loads, and I was always loath to spend 20-30 quid on 4 little wheels. But it has made a huge difference. Just the time it takes to wheel a stack of stuff out of the way, considering against moving all those individual items, has saved me loads of times. And because it's easy to move, you're more likely to move it, which makes the place safer, and the whole experience of doing what you're making the better, in my opinion. So kind of bear that in mind, and hopefully it's been of interest, and hopefully there's been things in here that you've found useful. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. By all means, I'm more than open for all of that. So that's my space. Hopefully next year it will have changed. Am I going to be here? Am I going to be somewhere else? You never know. Just got to make the best of what you've got and appreciate what you've got. So until next time, y'all take care.